Ellie McKay, welcome to London.
Well, thank you for having me, Sanj.
No
The boot is on
worries.
the other foot.
And I think it was about a year ago when I came down to sunny Doncaster.
Was it?
Yeah, but was it about a year ago when
No.
my ugly mug appeared on the Daily Telegraph and I was kindly invited down to beautiful Doncaster to talk about my experience. And I was hoping back then that I'd like to return the favour, and it was brilliant that you messaged me a few weeks back, said I'm going to be in London, let's get together. And I'm really keen for the viewers and listeners to actually hear your story because it's one hell of a story. When you launched on a mission 2.0, your episode was called From Darkness to Dawn.
It was.
It was indeed. So let's talk through that. Let's talk through all of this. You're not someone who's new to the podcast world, but talk me through who Ellie was and who Ellie is now. Maybe even beginning before on a mission 1.0. Who is Ellie McKay?
You know what? My life's many things, Sanj, but boring is definitely not one of them. That is for sure. It's interesting. When we first met, when you came to Doncaster, how much of my backstory were you familiar with then?
It was arranged quite quickly for me to come down to Doncaster, and I was still getting off the fact that my mug was appearing on national news. And I was like, what's going on here? I'm sitting on a train to Doncaster. I looked up who Ellie McKay was. I thought, this lady's pretty good. She's got all these guests, Stephen Bartlett, Mo Gaudat, and now she's got me. So I was still on that high, and I had not done the level of research I've done now. And when I looked back and when I've done my research, I thought, fuck. She's been through a lot. So to answer your question, I probably knew the surface stuff, but not the depth of it.
You were one of my first interviews, actually, after the relaunch. So things were very raw and have evolved quite a lot from them. But to give your listeners a little bit of context, in the podcasting world, I launched the original On a Mission podcast back in 2020 during COVID. It was all a little bit random how it came about. Like a lot of other people, I was at home, sort of started to climb the walls a little bit, had a lot of really great moments with the family, spending quality time with the kids, but started to feel like I was losing a little bit of my identity, really missing out on those in-person get-togethers. A big part of my role at the time, I used to have a business with my soon-to-be ex-husband. We had a property development business, and I solely focused on the marketing side of that, which I used to thoroughly enjoy. So basically building the brand, my personal brand, the company brand, getting out and about, meeting potential clients, public speaking. I was featuring in magazines, really just building a lot of hype around the country, which was something I had a natural aptitude towards. We got into the property business in 2018, which was when I really started getting back into self-development again. Because up until that point, I would say for a good 10 years, I was. I mean, it wasn't all doom and gloom. I don't want to exaggerate it, but I was a shadow of the person you see before you today. And a big part of that, I think, was due to lifestyle, to do with burnout, to do with stress and the way that I manage stress. And I'd been on antidepressants for probably best part of a decade at that point. I'd previously been quite a high performance person. I used to work in the sales industry. I was a bit of a high flyer, which is what brought me to Yorkshire in the first place back, God, more years than I care to remember, really, 20 plus years ago now. I worked in the double glazed industry. I was offered a promotion and I moved very quickly, just made an instant decision and decided to kind of relocate my life. And at that point, I had 100 staff working for me. I was working morning, noon, and evening, working weekends. Absolutely loved what I did. But the older I got and a few other things started to play into it, I had a lot of family commitments. My sister was very unwell at the time and I needed the flexibility of getting back to Scotland, which that level of job didn't really afford me. So I kind of left that high-flying industry and just had what I would class as a more normal sort of career from that point, the 9 to 5. But somewhere along the lines, I ended up on antidepressant. A lot of the things that I used to do definitely didn't contribute towards optimal mental or physical health. I used to drink quite a lot. I used to eat absolute shit. I was quite sedentary. I used to overeat. I used to also spent a lot of time listening to the news and programs on politics and just basically keeping myself in quite a low vibration. So it wasn't until 2018 when we launched the business that I started getting involved in masterminds and self-development and things like that again, starting to listen to people like Grant Cardone and Tony Robbins and taking a little bit more accountability for my own life. But one of the things actually that I would like to say, because I think this is really important, I was on quite heavy duty medication for both anxiety and depression. I was on, I think it's 150 milligrams of amitriptyline and various other things.
This for 10 years, you said?
Yeah. I don't care what anyone says, completely voids you of your personality, makes you, well, certainly in my case, it makes you lethargic, it makes you, I mean, I wasn't in good mental health, so it's hard to make a direct comparison, but if the whole point of the medication was to make you feel like you're skipping about the place, that definitely wasn't reality. And yeah, you think things kind of spiraled, but very, very gradually so that you didn't really notice it. But 2018, I actually went to watch Grant Cardone, first event like that I'd ever been to, and he was talking about medication and self-responsibility, and he's actually very anti-pharma. So I came away all pumped up from this event. I've taken page after page of notes, and I'm like, right, fuck it, I don't need this medication. Literally ripped them up there and then, stuck them in the bin, and yeah, let's just see what happened next. It wasn't very pretty.
Okay, so if we just pause there, because I feel like we kind of not glossed over that, but we kind of gone from 10 years of taking medication to ripping up the prescriptions. If you don't mind, what were the things that were leading you into that mental state to begin with?
Okay, so at the time, I was getting bullied at work. I used to work within the prison service at that point, and I was getting very badly bullied from a woman in a really senior position, and everyone was aware of what was going on, but no one would stand up for me or kind of come to my defence because of the stature that this woman had. She had a MBE and was so highly regarded that people just accepted this kind of behaviour from her, which was really appalling. And I remember coming back from work and turning to the wine most nights just as a way of decompressing. We were also going through quite a lot of stress. Of my one of my ex-husband's kind of great get rich quick initiatives, we bought, I mean, to be fair, in his defence, I shouldn't say that. So back in the day, you used to be able to buy a property and refinance it in the same day. So it was fill your boots times if you were a developer during that era. So we'd actually bought our first property in, I think it was 2006, which was off plan. And I think we bought it for, I forget the numbers now. I think we bought it for 125 grand, and it was going to be worth 200 grand on completion. Yeah, just take the money, refinance, and jobs are good in. But of course, things never really work out like that, do they? The development got flooded, so the whole thing got delayed by a couple of years, and then the 2008 crash happened. So this property that was meant to be worth 200 grand was basically worth about 60 grand. The regulations all changed, so you couldn't refinance on the same day anyway. And actually what happened was we had like a 60+ thousand pound deficit that we had to raise. We were in negative equity. So that was my first taste of property development, and actually it was a red flag. I should have listened to the universe at that point. So yeah, I think the combination of dealing with that stress and getting bullied in the workplace, plus my lack of, I didn't have the toolbox that I've got now to be able to manage stress, manage my energy, or have any sort of mindfulness on other contributing factors to your mental, spiritual, or emotional health.
Yeah, okay. I think that's really interesting context to why you had to turn to medication. And then you went to your masterclass.
Yeah.
And you walked out on the other extreme, just rip everything up and let's see where it takes me.
Can I just say though that because this is important, that was the most stupid thing I've ever done in my life.
That's where I'm going with this. I think when you mentioned this earlier, you said you ripped up your prescriptions, and then you alluded to the fact that it didn't really go how you expected at that time. So talk me through that.
there's no sugarcoating it. I was suicidal. It's as close as I've ever got to making an irreversible decision. I didn't consult with a doctor. I didn't wean myself off. I didn't try and skip a day or reduce the dosage. I just went from 100% to zero, and within a couple of days, or I forget the time frames, but pretty quickly my reality came crashing down, and I really struggled to even get out of bed. Darkness that I experienced at that point was incomparable to anything that I've ever been through or have been through since. And I know we're going to come to recent events where arguably I've been through the most extreme situation that I've ever faced in 42 years. But in terms of my mental health and how I cope, nothing has ever came close to taking me back to the state I was in back in early 2019 when I made this decision. And I remember at the time, so I've always thought, I know that we're not meant to be judgmental, but we are, let's be honest. And whenever I heard a story or heard of someone taking their own life that was a parent, especially since becoming a parent, I've always judged that person as being extremely selfish. How could they put themselves over the emotional needs of their children? How could they do that to the person or people that they're meant to love most in the world? But yet when I found myself in that situation, I could see things from an entirely different perspective, because as a parent to three beautiful, amazing children.
And you had children at the time?
Yeah, I had all three children by that point. I truly, hand on heart, believed that me not being here would be the best thing for them, and it was actually a selfless act. And I knew that they would be upset initially and would be traumatized at the fact that mum's no longer here. But my belief was, because of who I was and this black, dark energy that surrounded me, that was just going to infect everyone around me that I loved. And in the long term, they would be far better off without having me in their life. And that was very clearly how I thought at that time. And it has made me a lot more empathetic to other people that are in a similar situation.
It does. I recall when your sound's a lot deeper than mine. I recall waking up with my face down on Finchley Road Tube Station, not knowing what happened to me, with many thoughts in my head. But what flashed through my eyes, as well as my family, were my ancestors, were the struggles of my immigrant ancestors who've worked hard. And I said, is this what they worked hard for? For me to be fucking face down on Finchley Road Tube Station saying, I've had enough, just get yourself up and rewire yourself. And I think that the family does come close to actually bringing you back around again. But you then created On a Mission 1.0, I think in 2020. And I'm sure there were things that were going on in between. You now created On Mission 2.0. You created the #1 podcast in the UK. How did you leap from that darkness to creating On a Mission? And what happened in between? You had your property business as well, you know?
Yeah, it's quite funny. I just realised you just asked me a question. I'm giving you my life story and then not answer the question.
No, you did answer
Classic
the question.
Ellie.
You did answer the question.
Oh, you're very kind to me. And this is why I can't listen to my own podcast back, because I'm like, I've got an open loop that never ended. I'm going to have to get this guest back in.
No, I think, to be honest, the question I asked was just trying to define that darkness a little bit in the context, and you've painted it. And we can either go on about that,
no,
right? But I know we're coming to another stage in your life recently where the darkness came back, and I think we can go into it there if you want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So 2019, didn't go back on medication. I basically, I was sailing the storm, but this was very much the catalyst for me getting back into self-development and mindfulness. Because when I was younger, in my late teenage years, early 20s, when I was in the sort of high-powered senior positions, I was all about Tony Robbins and Paul McKenna, how to change your life.
Make it sound easy, don't they?
They do make it sound easy, but I think things are as easy or difficult as we choose to make them. And when I lived and breathed that stuff, I don't think it's a coincidence that my life was successful, in quotation marks. But as I moved away from that reality and started to think it was a load of happy, clappy bullshit, it was a load of American nonsense, isn't it interesting that the depression and the anxiety and all these other things started to creep in? So launched the business with my husband, going back down the self-development rabbit hole, building the business, building the personal brand, as we've already discussed. And 2020 lockdown situation.
Ellie, in lockdown though, so sorry to jump in again. You've gone from this really dark place,
Yeah.
really dark place. Something has pulled you out of it. And you talk about self-development like it just happened like that. We then had bloody lockdown, which could have thrown you into another kind of trough around mental health and development. There's some power from within. There's some things that we haven't connected to say you've gone from that real darkhood to actually within realizing only self-development is going to get you. How did you go from that sheer darkness to getting yourself onto that path?
I think that particular period of darkness was very much manipulated by coming off of that medication. So that did naturally kind of ease off a little bit. But I'm a bit of a go big or go home type of person. So when I say self-development, I really immerse myself into that reality. I was in masterminds. I was surrounding myself with go-getters, with high energy people. I was listening to podcasts. I was listening to audiobooks. It was almost like I was in a bit of a cult, but in a positive way. I really did have to work hard at rewiring my brain. But again, full transparency, I wasn't particularly healthy. I was still, I mean, no alcoholic by any stretch, but still definitely drinking way more than I now know to be healthy. My diet wasn't fantastic.
But you started the journey.
Yeah, exercise intermittent, but mindset wise, I was really making some kind of positive inroads. And this is when I started to follow people like Wim Hof and started researching a bit more into your ice baths and starting to play about with supplements and things like that. So I was very much on the journey and I was surrounded by amazing people. I'm a great believer in following people that are further down the path that you want to travel. And I suppose one of my skills is blagging. It's getting around the right people.
And a heck of a blagger because you created the biggest podcast in the UK and you had some of the biggest guests on there. You're not a blagger. You've got some science to this.
There's no science. Honestly, everyone overestimates. Everyone's like, what's your blueprint? I actually tried to record a course as well. I am going, because like you say, there will be some strategy somewhere. Yeah. I'm just not convinced I necessarily know what it is. It's probably a lot of my story is going to sound a little bit woo-woo, in all honesty, because the reason the podcast was launched in the first place was a day in lockdown when my husband at the time had just nipped to the petrol station to go and get some bread or something like that. So you're only talking a 10-minute round trip. And when he left, I was on the Zoom to Kira, who's still my podcast manager, still with me to this day. We were just having whatever chat about work, and my 3 children were running around, happy as Larry, no drama. By the time my ex-husband has come back, I'm sort of laid there, kind of in the fetal position. There's literally shitty handprints all over the wall. There's a shattered glass in the middle of the room. And I'm just there going, I can't do this anymore. Yeah. And my youngest, Sammy, decided to whip off his nappy mid-Zoom call, which he just had a massive poo, put his hands all in it, running round, putting his hands all over it. And I'm running after him, trying to get him to stop.
It's literally a shit show going on.
It's a shit show going on. And he's finding this hilarious that I'm chasing him. So he's running faster, grabs the expensive lamp, pulls it off. Oh, and it's just smashed.
This is on a Zoom call.
Yeah, so Kira's got the bird's eye view. She's got some stories, that girl. Anyway, we just, again, I think I'm a great believer that the universe gives us what we need when we need it. And coincidentally, I don't believe in coincidences, but the week prior to lockdown, I'd been introduced to transcendental meditation. So it's not really something I practice anymore, but it was a big part of my life for quite a long time. And
what did you do with that?
So, my ex-husband Mark, he just said, right, you need to go upstairs, have some time to yourself, like go meditate, do whatever you want. It's like, right, okay. So anyway, went upstairs, locked myself, barricaded myself in the spare room, and during this particular meditation, it came to me clear as day. It was like, this came from nowhere. There'd been no talk of this. This wasn't something I'd been subconsciously thinking about. This wasn't part of any business plan. But I got a download that told me to start interviewing people. And before I could change my mind, because I know what I'm like, I came out of this medication, a Freudian slip. I came out of this meditation and I fired off some voice notes to hold myself to account to people that wanted to interview. And the premise was me on a Sunday night interviewing people a bit Alan Carr style with a glass of wine, because obviously I was still drinking back then. And it was just really informal. It was called the Sunday Series. It wasn't a podcast at that point. It was just a Facebook Live. And I was shocked, absolutely shocked at how many people actually watched these interviews. And it wasn't necessarily on the live. You might have 100 people on the live, which isn't bad, but it was within the next few days and weeks it was going up to hundreds and then thousands and then tens of thousands. I was like, whoa. Because up until that point I used to travel a lot to build the brand, always on my own dime. I come to London, train fares, hotels, to sit to a room, speak to a room of maybe like 30 people, 50 people, 100 people, just to get the social media photos and the connections and things like that. So it was a bit of a light bulb moment. I thought, hang on a minute, I can sit here in my kitchen in Doncaster with a glass of wine with my pyjama bottoms on
And get thousands of people listening in.
and have thousands of people tapping into this. So yeah, it was a massive epiphany. And then at the end of the 10 weeks and the world got released again, I had 10 episodes of the Sunday series. That's when it was like a bit of a sliding doors moment. It was like, right, are we going to take this to the next level and create a podcast, or are we going to just chalk it down to experience and go back to the day job, if you will?
And that's where On a Mission was created.
That's where it was created, and I could never have envisaged in my wildest dreams that we would have achieved what we went on to achieve.
And what did you achieve with On a Mission?
This is going to sound really cheesy. The biggest achievement for me has been the relationships I've built, the connections that I've made, and the wisdom that I've got through doing those interviews. Because launching a podcast, putting anything else aside, is like your own university. You have such a unique opportunity to be able to sit down and connect with whoever you want, really, from any walk of life, any area of expertise. And some of the insights and golden nuggets, not only are they transforming the lives of the listeners, but they're transforming my life as well.
So, and I'm sure many of the listeners would have been following you at the time, but for those teeny people who may not have, just remind us of the numbers. What kind of numbers were you doing on your podcast? What kind of charts were you hitting? And throw some names in. Just throw these names in of people you interviewed.
It's quite ironic. We got to number one in the charts. I had to pull my podcast down about a week later. It was so soul destroying.
Yeah.
So soul destroying. But yeah, we've had some pretty decent folk. Stephen Bartlett. We've had
just throw in Stephen Bartlett.
Stevie B, my mate Steve. We've had Eddie Hearn. Well, it was actually Barry Hearn originally. Eddie's dad. Oh, what a gentleman. Oh, he's still one of my favourites, Barry. I tell you what, that was a bit of a fuck up as well, because the mic didn't work on that one. But
he came to Doncaster in the mic.
No, he didn't. This was, I used to pretty much record exclusively in London at that point. We've had, it depends what you've into, I had doctors and scientists, but I've had your Kerry Katonas and your celeb. A couple of times, I've been to Mo's house in Dubai and interviewed him in London as well.
You had a boxer on as well, haven't you?
You know what? So this is actually, Ricky's been on twice, Ricky has.
I love Ricky.
He's amazing. So it's quite a funny story, actually. So he was one of my very first guests, if not my first guest. I can't remember the order they were released, but he was definitely one of the first three that I recorded. And it was just as we were all going into do you remember all that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 bollocks? Well, I think we were going to tier 3, it was essential travel. I'm like, this is essential. You do not get these opportunities every day. But someone I knew happened to know Ricky, and he said, I'll be able to get you Ricky Hatton for your podcast. And it was one of those, he's a bit of a Del Boy, bit of a wheeler dealer type of guy, a really lovely guy. But I was kind of thinking, of course he can. So if he can get me Ricky Hatton, it's a brand new podcast. Lo and behold, he gets me Ricky Manager's number and we get the deal done. We've got the interview arranged to do it over Zoom. And I don't know what made me decide to chance my arm, but I'm just going to message him and just say, any chance we can do it in person? We won't take up any more of Ricky's time. We'll stick to the hour or whatever that was agreed. By the way, when you get people in person, you get significantly longer. Yeah. But if it's okay, we'd like to come to Hatton's gym, and I think it'd look better for the online audience, etc. And they're like, yeah, it makes no difference as long as you stick to your time slot. Do what you want. Brilliant. So there was a slight problem. We just launched this podcast. I didn't have a videographer.
Yep.
Didn't really have a budget. We didn't have any equipment. We didn't have a clue what we were doing. So I've rang Kira, my podcast manager. Although she wasn't my podcast manager, she was a digital marketing apprentice for the property business at this point. It's like, you're not going to believe this, Kira. I was like, you'll never believe who we've secured for the podcast. We've only went and got the legend that is Ricky Hatton. And she was like, oh my God. She's like, that's amazing. Who's Ricky Hatton? I mean, she's only 25.
I get it. I get
I
it.
was like, right, speak to your dad. So then I've got her dad jumping around the living room and go, oh my God, it's Ricky Hatton. That's amazing. So I said, look, you've got one of two choices. I said, I can get in touch with a local videographer. We'll get someone to come out and film it. I said, or you've got, I think it was 4 or 5 days to find out what equipment we need to get and become not just proficient, but world class at video editing. You need to know what lighting to get, what settings, the full shebang. And basically, I'm not going to accept any excuses. Are you up for the challenge? And she was like, right, I'm in. And that's what we did. We went and sourced a load of secondhand cameras off a marketplace or wherever it was, some crappy lights, and rocked up at Hatton's gym about 2 hours before we needed to, just to really extend this process.
Yeah.
I've got a chance to build a brilliant relationship with Ricky in the meantime. And it was I would say, and I've said this to Ricky several times since, it was instrumental in the success of the podcast, because from that point on, it was so easy to get other guests. Now, the downloads were shit. We hardly had any followers. There was only my mum, my dad, my sister listening to this podcast at the time. You know how hard it is
It's
to get
very hard,
numbers
yeah.
when you launch a podcast.
And then someone hacks you just when you're doing well.
I mean, honestly, you couldn't make it up, could you? But when I was approaching people and they were aware that I'd had Ricky Hatton, it was just a perception. It was without me having to say any words or tell any lies. There was just this preconceived perception that because Ricky Hatton's been on it, it must be bigger than it was. And then I got Johnny Nelson, and then I got the next one. And of course, because I'm getting the names, it was all a bit chicken and the egg, because I got the names and I started getting the
Domino,
numbers, you know? So, yeah, I'll be forever grateful to Ricky.
No, I could sit here all day and just say, how did he get Stephen Bartlett? How did he get Eddie Hearn? You and I would love the conversation, but I think the audience may say, yeah, okay, we get it. But clearly you've got a superpower there in connecting people, building relationships.
Manifesting.
Yeah, and manifesting. And things seem to be flying at this stage. You said you were #1 in the UK charts. Property business was going okay at that time?
I thought it was going great, son.
Exactly. I think what seems on paper seemed to be going well.
Yeah.
Things financially seemed to be, from afar, from me, it seemed to be going quite well. Everything was in place.
Yes.
What happened then?
So the family we were all relocating to Dubai. Like you say, things were going great, working on some big developments, got a multi-million-pound property portfolio, or so I thought. A big part of my role within the business had been to build the PR, to build the brand, to build the trust and the credibility, which I'd like to think I was very good at. Spoke publicly about this before. I've actually done talks before on how to raise finance, how to build your brand within a business and be able to attract private investment. So yeah, that's the business model for the property business. You basically take on private investment, buy properties below market value. You have we had a team of up to 16, 17 staff at one point. We had project managers. We used to do HMOs, house of multiple occupations. We were doing commercial developments. We were doing your traditional buy-to-lets, your buy-to-flips, which is buy, do up and sell. We were adding to our own portfolio. Things like you say, doing really well. Cash growing from strength to strength. We're getting international press coverage at that time. I'm writing articles for things like Business Leader magazine.
You begin to write your book?
Yeah, starting to write. Yeah, I've done your research. And yeah, things were going really well. Now, what year we're in now, 2025, 2023, back into 2023. Quite a lot of red flags, quite a lot of uncomfortable conversations with my husband. So there was 3 of us in the business, 3 directors. I was not really operational for the last couple of years. I was focusing solely on the podcast. The podcast was a business, standalone. I say it was a standalone business. Very naive mistake that I made actually was not to separate it as a standalone business, but for all intents and purposes, we were bringing in revenue.
So it was under the umbrella company of the property business.
Yes, yeah, which I was advised was the most tax efficient way to do things, but with the benefit of hindsight.
I can probably tell you now, not as an accountant or tax advisor, probably wasn't the best way.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was very naive in a lot of areas, probably the least of which, but to be honest, that revenue was clearly keeping us afloat for a period of time. So there was quite a few red flags. I was finding out that people had invested into the business that had not been made aware of. I had a few people emailing me asking why repayments were overdue, people that had no contact with before or business dealing with in any shape or form. And just before I recorded the Stephen Bartlett interview, which was the first Stephen Bartlett interview, it was December 2023, I'd found out that we owed a significant amount of debt. So, yeah, it was a really, really challenging time. Christmas was horrific that year, absolutely horrific. But I truly believed, based on what was told and what was shown, that we had the resources available to us to turn the situation around. And then late January 2024, I'm in London with my best friend Tony. I've been podcasting through the day. I had an event that evening. Another good friend of mine was actually driving to central London to take me out for a meal. And the phone goes, and it's Mark on the phone.
Your husband?
Yeah. And he's in tears. I knew straight away, because I'd been chasing him all afternoon. There was a payment that was due to go out to an investor, and I'd been dealing with the communication
This
with
is
it.
a redemption to an investor, so okay. So it's basically a return to the investor.
So I found out in December we owed a significant amount of money to this person. I've taken over the communication. I've been shown bank statements and various other things to show that we're on track to make this big repayment, basically. I've been chasing Mark through the day before my podcast. As soon as I get out the podcast, has that money landed? Has it been transferred? Nothing. So I'm starting to get a little bit alarmed at this point, thinking he's either really, really incompetent or there's something. Starting to feel very uncomfortable about this situation. So the phone goes, Mark's in tears, and his opening line was, "It's all gone." I kind of knew. I mean, I didn't know everything. I kind of knew. Someone does not ring you up. I mean, in a 20-year relationship, I don't think I'd ever...
20 years.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever seen him cry. So for him to be ringing me up in tears, telling me it's all gone, I was under no illusions about the severity of what was about to come. So I asked him to clarify, like, what do you mean, what's gone? And that's when he said, like, everything.
This is the £1 million plus property business.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't, although I knew in an instant that my life would never be the same again when I got that phone call, I couldn't really have processed or understood the depth of what was about to come. And also, I didn't have, for example, the family home. We had a couple $100,000 in equity, as far as I'm aware. That had all been rinsed, unbeknownst to me. Properties that I believed were in our portfolio had been sold without my knowledge.
Because they've got charges on them from the lenders.
Yeah. So there was so many things like that. So when I'm replying to people, when I'm trying to face the situation head on in the month or two before when things had really started to spiral, I'm having communication with people based on very, very limited information. So this starts to unravel. From that phone call, things unravelled very, very quickly. And I remember my friend, she took me to the pub, and I need to get home, I need to get back to Doncaster. And I'm waiting for my train, and I was sort of catatonic, and my friends, a bit like me, we find solutions to things. We're the people that you go to when you're in the shit, because we think clearly, we think logically, and we will come up with some way around things. And we're looking at each other, and I'm telling her what's happened in the conversation, and she's just looking at me, she's going, you're fucked. I'm like, I'm fucked, like totally fucked. And when I say fucked, Sanj, I went from thinking that on paper I'm a millionaire to realising that my family home's getting repossessed, the car's been repossessed, everything I've ever worked for is gone. But more importantly, your mind goes very, very quickly to all the other people that are impacted as well.
Father.
My dad. being one of them. Friends of mine, good people that believed in, not necessarily people that I'd even met or had a conversation with, but I've built this brand, this perception, this trust based on integrity, based on ethics, based on everything that I stand for, everything that I talk about and continue to talk about to this day. And just, it came crashing down. My dad's life savings, my dad's in a property that we own that's about to get repossessed. Every single penny, including his pension, has been put into that property business. I didn't have money it was crazy. There was no money to feed the kids. The bank accounts had been wiped out. It was when he said, it's all gone. We're not talking, we've got a little buffer here. We're talking about, I've got flights booked to Dubai 2 days later.
Your suitcase packed.
My suitcase was packed.
Had them registered in private schooling, right?
They were so we weren't moving in 2 days. I was just going for a business trip. I had podcasts arranged, I had the studio booked, I was meeting sponsors, about to sign a multi-6-figure sponsorship deal. I had meetings lined up. I had a full itinerary, and there wasn't even not that it would have been appropriate to go. There wouldn't have even been money to get to the airport, let alone buy a drink at the airport or feed myself when I'm out there. It was insane. Like, even now, talking about it, it's almost like I've decompartmentalized a little bit, because it is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's amazing how primal you get very, very quickly, because you need shelter. You need to provide a roof over your head for your children. You need to make sure that they can get fed. The world does not stop. So I've came back to Doncaster absolutely catatonic. Obviously had a showdown with my ex-husband, and I remember I stared at the wall the entire night, and I don't think I was even thinking. I think it was just complete shock at that reality. And then the kids get up as normal the next day, and you're having to take the kids to school. How they didn't pick up on what was going on, I don't know, but yeah, it was, your cortisol levels, your fight or flight that's triggered at that time. I suppose it's kind of akin to being in a war situation.
Given what you told us at the start about the phase 10 years where you'd hit a depression and you were on medication, you'd now hit another phase of life where things were arguably even tougher. How did you cope? What were your coping mechanisms? You could have easily flipped to medication here again.
Oh, well, I nearly did, funnily enough. So, again, I wasn't just sat there quoting Tony Robbins at this point.
Watching Tony Robbins videos.
Yeah, like, it's fine, everything's a mindset. No, it absolutely wasn't like that. I didn't sleep for days, and I'm talking no sleep at all for, 4 or 5 days. I was convulsing, I had heart palpitations, I had a physical tic, which was never something I've experienced before.
Tick?
Yeah, I was ticking.
Wow.
Yeah, you like Lewis Capaldi or like people that have Tourette's. Yeah. It was quite prominent for a few days. I couldn't eat anything. I was barely drinking water. I was in a complete state. A friend of mine actually drove round and brought me some coconut water and a banana at one point, just to make sure I was getting some electrolytes. I was just in a complete...
You were in a dark place.
Yeah, I was. But the other thing is, and I've not really spoke about this before, you alluded to earlier about some sort of an inner grit or something that makes you continue in the darkest moments. So everything I've just said there is the truth. I wasn't sleeping, but I was still functioning. I had to take direct action. You have no choice but to put one foot in front of the other. The kids did need to go to school. The kids did need to get fed. I did need to immediately take action. There was too many people and moving parts that were affected by this to bury my head in the sand, and I did that. Within hours I was on the phone to business liquidation advisors, getting information, arranging meetings, trying to speak to solicitors. Thankfully, I had a bit of a grace period because everyone was expecting me to be in Dubai. Therefore, no one was kind of ringing me for a catch-up, or it wasn't unusual for me to be completely off the grid.
Yeah.
I just came off all social media because, for obvious reasons, building a brand is not something that was at the forefront of my mind at that point. It was just a complete shit show. Reputationally as well, I was thinking, I'm going to be ruined here. I'm meant to be the face of integrity and honour and everything else that I'm banging on about, and I'm here, director of a company that's gone under, owing millions of pounds, which has ruined a lot of people's lives. Out with my own family, my dad, and the other friends that I mentioned, it was absolutely horrendous. But I did keep going. I had to take direct action. I had to speak to the people that were looking to repossess the house, because that happened very, very quickly as well. I had to try and get a rental sorted. I had to try and get some revenue.
Did you become homeless? I don't mean on the streets, but did you physically have a situation where you had to go and ask people if you could stay with them?
I had to register as homeless. Yeah. Yeah.
Let me ask a controversial question here. It's mildly controversial. There's a lot of talk going on at the moment about men's mental health, the division of labour at home, the division of stress. I often have conversations, and my wife can see it. You know, we happen to be going through a fairly stressful time at the moment, but there's this shit that men have to do, and this shit that women have to do. The old world, and a lot of men will sit there looking at their Excel spreadsheet, thinking, "Well, the finances are looking a bit rough in the next few months. I've got HMO properties. My wife is a director on those. She doesn't ask me, where did we just buy the next two from? Because we borrowed equity against others. Are there charges against all that?" There's certain stuff, I think, which people expect from a man to just look after the family, security, financial. Firstly, do you think that's fair that that pressure kind of lands on a man? But secondly, I think it's up to men to speak up and say, look, I'm actually taking decisions here, and I think that model doesn't exist anymore. We need to talk about it, the risks we're entering into. And it was any of that at play at all in that, you know, he was the one who's structuring all this. Look, Ellie, you own a company, isn't that great? But there's fucking risks with that.
There is, and again, I've spoke about this, and I want to speak about it more because as a director, you've got fiscal responsibilities. You know, my neck was on the chopping block for a load of decisions I didn't fucking make, Sanj. I didn't get that investment. I didn't make these decisions.
I can see my wife all over the books at home when this goes out.
Well, I would recommend anyone listening to this that's a director, because the amount of people that contacted me from hearing my story and said, God, I'm a director of my husband's or my wife's business, or I have got no clue. A lot of the time it's for tax purposes, etc. I would encourage everyone to take a bit more ownership. But to answer your question, I suppose I am quite traditional. I've always liked to be looked after financially. Is that something that I would do moving forward? I think I'd be extremely stupid. What's that saying? Happens once, shame on you. Happens twice, shame on me. But when I entered into the business in 2018, I had no experience of self-employment or running a business, whereas my husband and our other business partner had worked together for 10 years previously. They'd built a successful electrical installation business. They knew about Companies House and accountants and all of that kind of thing. That was all talking a foreign language to me. So I don't mind admitting that I was very happy to absolve myself of that responsibility. I've never been involved in the banking. I've never spoken to the solicitors, the brokers. I've never dealt with any of those aspects of the business. I dealt with the marketing side of it, the raising finance side of it, and the building the brand, all of which were very successful. But unfortunately, the operations, they weren't in alignment. But men's mental health is important, because I do have to look at, where was the breakdown in our relationship? Why did he not feel that he was able to come and speak to me? There must have been we spoke about that sliding doors moment earlier, there must have been a point where he's went left instead of going right. He's made a decision that he must have known deep down he should not have been making. Why did he feel that he had to take on that responsibility as opposed to offloading to the two other business partners that he had available to him? But when all this was going on initially, Mark went back on site. He just took a job as a labourer. We had to bring in money to feed the children instantly. At this point, I'm on eBay and Marketplace, selling anything that we've ever had of value: belts, watches, shoes, hot tubs, furniture, the kids' TVs. It was Christmas presents of oh God, I mean, it couldn't really have got any worse. So I needed his payslips. Gosh, this sounds brutal. I needed his payslips to be able to get into the rental. But yeah, there was no coming back from that situation. And when we got into the rental and I told him I wanted a divorce, he was, this is his story to tell whether he chooses to do it at some point in the future. But I, as a mother and as a wife, so, he went AWOL. We were really worried that he was going to do something really silly. And it was just a horrible, horrible time. On top of that, we've got this rental secured, meant to be long term. My credit rating by this point it would have almost been a game. Your credit rating updates every 30 days. I've found this out literally.
Yeah.
So of course I'm defaulting and everything. So I'm trying to get this rental within X amount of days because his credit rating's already shot to shit because he's been getting loans and all sorts that I'm not aware about for years.
You're up against the clock.
We're up against the clock. We managed to scrape through. I passed the credit check, got this rental, because this wasn't the point I had to register as homeless. You couldn't really make up what happened next. This long-term tenancy with the landlords over in China, they'd been there 10 plus years. 6 weeks into it, decided they were moving back. So by this point, I'm like credit rating 0 or something like that. And it was actually that point that I had to register myself and the children as homeless.
Unbelievable. So I think, Ellie, look, to give respect to this whole part of your life, we can't cover this in an hour, but I think the context is painted, and I think the backdrop of what happened is we've gone into that in a fair amount of detail. So On a Mission kind of died with that, I guess, with everything that happened at the time. Let's talk about the rebuild. Let's talk about the rebuild. Let's talk about On a Mission 2.0. Let's talk about who Ellie is compared to On a Mission 1.0. Let's talk about your hierarchy of needs. The Sanj 2 years ago, I had a flipped hierarchy of needs where I had the superficial stuff at the top, and fuck it, if I ate, I ate. But I've turned it back around again. Let's talk about the rebuild. Let's talk about the kind of things you needed to do to rebuild again. I know you are kind of into a lot of biohacking stuff as well. How did you start that journey? How did you get back on the road?
Yeah, I think it's Ellie McKay 2.0 as well, not just On a Mission 2.0. Yeah, as I mentioned, it was all interlinked, so the podcast was completely taken down. But there was something deep inside me, even on my darkest day, Sanj. My mindset is so evolved from the person I was back in 2019. Yes, I experienced darkness, and I told you about some of the physical ways in that manifested as well. But when you work really hard at reprogramming who you are, when you're blessed enough to have the conversations that I've had over the years on the original podcasts and take those learnings, I'll go as far as to say that it's saved my life. There's no way that I'd have went through all of that. In fact, I used to have this right above my desk in the office. We haven't come this far to only come this far. Oh my goodness, I could not resonate any more than that. There's no way that you can experience so much pain and trauma and learnings as well, because I learned more about myself in the last 18 months than I have in the 4 decades prior to that. I'm giving away my age then, and I appreciate I do identify as a 25-year-old. But yeah, I made the decision to relaunch the podcast. Initially, I was going to call it Unbreakable. But it was actually a conversation with one of my podcast guests, Al Barrett, who is the founder of Grenade. Yeah, amazing guy, absolutely phenomenal guy. Went to spend a day with him at his house, and we did some filming, and I was chatting with him afterwards, and he was aware of what was going on at the time, and had said about rebranding to Unbreakable. And he just said, you've worked too hard to build the brand. On a Mission, whether it's On a Mission or On a Mission 2.0, it holds so much weight, and it's synonymous with Ellie McKay. Be too quick to walk away from that. And that's when I decided, you're right, I'm going to relaunch. I need to face this head on. I need to tell people what's happened as opposed to try and paper over the cracks and shy away from it. And I'm going to learn, I'm going to implement, I've got a very unique opportunity here, Sanj, to implement all the things that I have told other people to do. I've got the blueprint on how to launch and create a #1 podcast. And I get to walk the walk with that. Now, I said to you about manifestation earlier. I have stood on stage before in front of 600 people and actually said, you could strip me of everything. You can strip me of all my financial wealth. You can strip me of all my properties. But one thing that you will never be able to take away from me is my mindset and my resilience. I have got the skills up here to bounce back from anything.
What are those skills?
Resilience.
Everyone bans resilience, right? Everyone bans the word resilience. But what you've gone through, you clearly have the tool set for resilience. What kind of tools did you use? You talk about manifestation. Other tools.
So, I believe a lot in energy, and some people think this is just kind of woo woo nonsense. But I believe that you have to be the energy that you want to attract. It's as simple as that. And when I was in victim mentality, which clearly I was at times at the start of last year, the first few months of last year, it started to become extremely clear to me that whilst there's a lot of people that may be able to empathise and put their arm around you, take you out for a coffee, in order for you to really be able to rebuild and start creating opportunities, you have to be in a higher vibration. And that's the skill. It's finding calm in the chaos. It's not waiting for your life to improve in order to make these changes. Having the skill set to, in your darkest of times, be able to rewrite your reality, to not accept that. And yeah, I mean, some of the stuff I was doing in the worst of moments, I kind of look back and cringe at now because I've already came on so far. But I was just dancing around constantly. I wasn't listening to podcasts or audiobooks, to be quite honest with you. I was a bit scunnered with it all, to use an old Scottish word.
Listen to Let's Grow Young.
No, I wasn't listening to anything, but that was first on my list when I came back. But yeah, I was just dancing around. I was just singing. I was trying to learn to like myself and fall in love with myself, probably for the first time in my entire life. Like, good is the enemy of great. I was getting out walking, I was getting out into nature every single day, just music, 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 brainwashing myself, keeping in a high vibration, and just putting one foot in front of the other, really slowly but surely, making sure that I'm able to meet the financial needs of my children and take all the actions, like the practical actions that I needed to take. And yeah, it is, what did I actually do to rebuild?
It sounds like you were setting yourself a direction without the pressure of a big badge at the end, without the pressure of a huge goal. You wanted to make sure that you were taking your daily actions to look after the kids, look after yourself. If you take those actions sustainably every single day, those big badges will come.
Actually, I just want to double down on that point, because even now, although I've came out of the majority of the trauma, I would say I'm still dealing with quite a lot of stuff, as you can appreciate, but the big stuff's all been dealt with. I'm very much still in the mindset of chunking it down to the small, almost inconsequential goals, as opposed to the, I've got to, I want to go from naught to X amount. But every time I'm setting myself these little small goals and achieving them, it's just building the confidence. And it's layering habits. It's not going from naught to 100, because I think that can be extremely overwhelming. And when you're going through a really shit time, I've said this before, but a successful day can just be getting out of bed. It can just be brushing your teeth. But yeah, bit by bit, started off making sure, I've got 2 dogs, so I have to take them out every day, come rain or shine. And that was a bit of a lifeline. My dad and I were doing that every single day together, just trying to prop each other up. And then you get to the point when you've been doing that consistently for a few months, it's like, right, I might take myself for a jog today. I'm not going to even put my Apple Watch on or anything. I don't care how fast I run. I don't care how far I run, but I'm just going to go out there and do this just from a mindfulness perspective. And then you start doing that, and then I increase that to maybe 2 times a week, and then gradually increase it to 3 times a week. And then bit by bit, I'm making more and more changes. I've cut out alcohol. I've realised that wasn't serving me.
Totally, 100%.
100%. I've not touched a drop of alcohol in 2025. Doing dry January, and I just thought, you know what? I don't need this at the moment. It's like, is this a net positive or a net negative to my life? And the reality was, it was taking more than it was given, because it does affect you. It affects your anxiety and things like that for days afterwards. And that's not talking about going out and getting absolutely smashed. Cutting out the processed foods, integrating ice baths back into my routine.
You did one the other day, didn't you? I saw it on Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely love it. Again, it's an interesting story how I ended up getting my ice bath. I manifested it. It was unfortunately, it was a casualty, one of the many house moves over the last 18 months, the inflatable one. I said out loud actually to a friend, I really need one of those all singing, all dancing ice baths, the self-regulating ones that you only need to clean every 6 months or so, that maintains the right pressure and temperature. But I've not got 3.5-4 grand for an ice bath, and if I did, it probably wouldn't be top of the priority list. And within a week of doing that, a very good friend of mine got in touch and said, would you like to do a brand collaboration? Wondered if you'd have one of our ice baths and give us some shout outs on the podcast and tag us in some Instagram posts. I thought, wow, that was an absolute blessing. So bit by bit, starting to make these changes, but I didn't try to do them all at once, Sanj. Now, as you know, I do high rocks, I take all the best supplements, try to look after my nutrition and keep hydrated, and yeah, I do all sorts of things, energy healing, but it's been a bit of a gradual path.
So I'm always telling my clients that exactly what you're doing is the best way. Create these 1% changes every single day of your life. Don't worry about the badges. Before you know it, your benchmark has increased every week. Go repeat that circle again. And before you know it, in a year's time, you've suddenly achieved something without you actually putting a badge on it. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. And you also said a couple of things. You said finding calm amongst the chaos, about dancing. One of the things I've say to people is that I've learned to dance within the storm. And so, in fact, people close to me will say, there's a time when you need to stop dancing and you need to start fighting, because the storm has got really strong and you're there just dancing around. You need to deal with it. What about community? So within that storm, when I choose to dance, there's people who don't want to dance. There's people who want to make the storm stronger. I've had to get rid of a lot of people. What's your thoughts on the community that supported you or has not supported you, and the way you've had to assess relationships generally?
When the tide's out, you can see who's swimming naked. Warren Buffett said that, and it's so true.
Yeah.
I am so blessed to have the most phenomenal network. I am so grateful. But if you said to me 18 months ago, it's the people that are in my corner are not necessarily the people that I would have thought were in my corner. There's people that have crawled out of the woodworks, that have appeared from nowhere. There's a lot of long-standing friends who've been 100% supportive, but there's also been people that I would have put good money on, would have had my back, that have scarpered like bloody rats in a sinking ship. It's very telling, but I see that as a positive thing, because you're smoking out the riffraff, basically. And when you lose your commercial value, or your perceived commercial value, it's very interesting how people change towards you. But the power of community is so important. And again, going back to the power of podcasting and some of the phenomenal guests that I've had in the past, a lot of those guests have turned out to become close personal friends of mine, and the amount of support I've had has been absolutely unbelievable. But what's really interesting is the relaunch episode of 2.0, with no subscribers, no followers, got more messages and comments than any of my previous episodes, including ones that went viral, that have had millions of views and downloads. This episode actually had more DMs. Bearing in mind, I've got very limited social media presence at the moment. I'm only on Instagram, which was my worst performing platform. I've only got like 30,000 connections on there. I had hundreds of thousands of followers prior to all this happening, and a podcast that was absolutely flying. Yeah, I got more messages about that relaunch episode. And what that told me is that everyone's got a story. Everyone is going through their own version of trauma, or has been through their own version of trauma or adversity. So this story, the reason I'm sharing it, not necessarily, I was going to say so eloquently, I don't necessarily know it's very eloquent, is because people resonate. They resonate with the authenticity, they resonate with the vulnerability, but this isn't a woe is me, get your violins out, because I'm definitely not a victim. The point in me sharing this with such candor is to show people that whatever you're going through, whatever you're experiencing now, you will get through it. It will ease up. This too shall pass. And there's times where you can't see a way out. But if you can just hang in, if you can just keep putting one foot in front of the other, everyone is capable of turning their lives around. The only thing that's final is death. And whilst you've still got breath in you, keep getting back up. Keep fighting and keep sharing, because there are people out there who you don't need to have a podcast or a social media following, but take it from someone who knows firsthand. there's people out there who will resonate with what you're going through, that are going through something similar. And as I've said, I receive thousands of messages, and I still receive hundreds of messages every week now about the relaunch episode that went out in September, because people want to talk and they want to feel heard. And when you do share your story, it almost gives other people permission to do the same and to perhaps get the help and support that they need.
Absolutely. You've just given a conclusion there without me asking you for a conclusion. And that's absolutely amazing thoughts. And I guess finally, Ellie, if we were to sit down in a year's time, what do you hope that we'll be talking about?
Oh, the things that matter. Let's talk about our health journeys, our biohacking journeys. Let's talk about the amazing people that we've met and that we've connected with over the last 12 months in our podcasts, what we've learned, who we've become. And yeah, hopefully we'll be sharing some successes along the way. I'm very much looking forward to seeing where 2.0 goes. I do feel like I've got a bit of an itch to scratch. I know what it takes to produce #1 podcast. I know that we will be able to do that again, and I'm looking forward to being able to celebrate being back on top. But to me, success isn't something that I'm going to be waiting to celebrate in 12 months' time. Success is when your expectations and your reality are in alignment. And at the moment, I can honestly say that every day I'm leading a successful, wealthy life. And I just want to live in the moment and take every day as it comes and genuinely feel the gratitude and appreciation for everything that I do have, as opposed to focusing on what I don't have.
And I'm sure we will be talking about that in a year, and I'll be closely following you as a #2 podcast. And I think, although we've not talked much about biohacking, that word itself, you've mentioned plenty of things to do with that. I think we've talked about stress resiliency. You mentioned supplementation. You mentioned cold baths and some of the exercises you do around that. But the reason I've not gone into biohacking too much in this stage is because I think it's all useless unless you've got mental clarity, purpose, and learning to dance within the storm. And you've clearly got that. And I think a future episode, we'll go deeply into some of your other practices around. If you talk about meditation, manifestation, there's many more chapters we can write with how you're rebuilding yourself. But I just love talking to you, and I think it's an absolute inspiration. We've got such similar stories, and I wish you all the best. And if there's anything that I haven't talked about which you'd like to talk about, feel free to bring it up now. You've mentioned your Instagram. Are there any other ways in which people can follow you?
Anyone who wants to drop me an email, I will personally respond. And just want to say thanks for having me, Sanj. You're a really good host. You're very eloquent, and you listen, you do your research, and you've just got fantastic energy. So I'm wishing you genuinely every success with it.
I love that word energy. I really do. I really do love that word energy. Just getting rid of negative energy and having positive energy. But thank you for those words, Ellie. And yeah, thanks for coming down.